What is the single most crucial belief an avoidant is desperately trying to convince the world and themselves of by constantly pulling away? It's not simply a fear of commitment or a lack of feeling. It is a deep psychological conviction that their entire emotional survival depends on maintaining absolute self-sufficiency. This distance is not a rejection of you. It is proof for their core operating system. Every time they retreat, they are gathering evidence to support the one narrative they cannot afford to lose. I do not need anyone. Today, you will understand the three core psychological proofs the avoidant is trying to establish through distance, and how recognizing this internal mission is the key to breaking the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal. If you have ever felt confused by someone who seems to want closeness but constantly pushes it away, stay with me. We are going to expose the hidden psychological agenda behind the distance. The distance maintained by the avoidant operates as a performance, a tireless effort to validate a series of psychological beliefs. The gap intentionally created between themselves and others is not empty. It is actively filled with the necessary evidence to sustain their emotional balance. The foundational belief fueling this entire performance is the conviction that vulnerability equals destruction. To acknowledge a need for another is to grant them power, and granting power carries the inherent risk of being abandoned or overwhelmed. Consequently, distance is perceived as the only truly safe emotional position. The first psychological proof the avoidant seeks to establish is what we call the proof of emotional immunity. Their relentless effort is aimed at demonstrating that their feelings can be successfully managed, controlled, and ultimately suppressed to a degree that renders them immune to the pain associated with loss or rejection. This represents the idealized state they constantly pursue, a form of relationship where engagement occurs strictly on their terms, without the necessity of deep emotional experience. In the real world, this proof shows up as an unwavering focus on logic, practicality, and tangible external achievements. When a conversation moves toward emotional territory, the avoidant predictably pivots to a factual, analytical breakdown of the situation. As a relationship progresses in depth, they often become suddenly focused on professional work, consuming hobbies, or even minor logistical complications. These behaviors are not mere distractions. They serve as active internal demonstrations that their emotional regulation system remains uncompromised. Moment by moment, they are proving their capacity to successfully turn feelings into non-threats, thereby maintaining a cool, impenetrable exterior. You will notice this in everyday interactions. When you express a feeling like loneliness or sadness about their withdrawal, they immediately respond with suggestions about schedules, routines, or practical solutions. They might say something like, "Maybe we should look at our communication patterns," or "That's an interesting point about modern relationships." What they are doing is taking your emotional expression and converting it into an abstract concept they can analyze safely from a distance. This is not because they do not care. It is because caring feels dangerous, and proving they can intellectualize the feeling away is how they maintain their sense of safety. The second psychological proof is the proof of unnecessary interdependence. The avoidant operates with the firm conviction that every conceivable need, whether emotional, logistical, or otherwise, can and must be satisfied entirely by themselves. Interdependence is not viewed as a natural, healthy component of connection, but rather as a profound and dangerous weakness. This proof is actively constructed through a consistent pattern of rejecting offers of help, minimizing the importance of shared activities, and meticulously maintaining strictly separate lives, even within the context of a committed partnership. This particular proof represents the reality that stands in sharp contrast to the idealized relationship state. While the ideal involves a stable partnership, the lived reality is a constant effort to maintain two distinctly parallel lives that only occasionally overlap. The avoidant frequently takes on excessive personal burdens, steadfastly refuses to delegate tasks, or even subtly sabotages shared plans, all in a determined effort to demonstrate that their success is wholly self-generated. This behavior is ultimately not about competence. Its true nature is control. They are actively proving their capacity to survive and even flourish without accepting reliance on the very individuals with whom they share their life. You will see this play out in seemingly small ways that carry enormous psychological weight for the avoidant. They will refuse a ride even when it is convenient. They will insist on paying for themselves even in situations where sharing costs makes more sense. They will take on projects alone that would be easier with help. They will maintain separate bank accounts, separate friend groups, separate hobbies, all designed to prove that their life functions independently of yours. When you offer assistance, no matter how minor, they respond with some version of, "I've got it," or "I can handle it myself." This is not stubbornness. It is psychological proof. They are demonstrating to themselves over and over that your contribution to their life is not required. Because if they need you and you leave, they will be destroyed. But if they never need you, they are safe. The third and arguably most critical psychological proof is the proof of self-contained value. This is the avoidant's internal mission to validate their inherent worth exclusively through internal metrics, completely detached from any form of external validation or relational achievement. They are attempting to establish that their value is inherent, unshakable, and exists entirely independent of whether they are loved, desired, or actively pursued. This belief serves as the ultimate psychological defense against the fear of abandonment. If their value is truly self-contained, then no external force possesses the power to diminish or remove it. The manifestation of this proof is a deep, almost ingrained discomfort whenever they encounter praise, emotional gifts, or acts of service. They will consistently deflect compliments, minimize the significance of affectionate gestures, or rapidly redirect the conversation when the focus shifts to their emotional impact on others. These behaviors are not rooted in false modesty. They function as an essential defense mechanism. Accepting external validation would immediately compromise their internal proof. Such acceptance would imply a need for the other person's perspective to feel worthy, a concept that fundamentally contradicts their core mission of absolute self-sufficiency. When you tell them they are important to you, they become uncomfortable. When you express gratitude for their presence in your life, they deflect. When you give them a gift that carries emotional meaning, they minimize it or make a joke to diffuse the intensity. This is not because they do not value you. It is because accepting that your perception of them matters would mean their sense of worth is dependent on your continued positive regard. And dependency, in any form, is the enemy of their entire psychological structure. They need to prove to themselves that even if you left tomorrow, even if you stopped loving them, even if you never thought of them again, their value would remain intact. Because if their value depends on you, losing you would mean losing themselves. Understanding the nature of these three proofs fundamentally alters the perception of the avoidant's distance. It ceases to be interpreted as a personal slight. Instead, it is revealed as a direct reflection of their intense internal psychological effort. Their actions are not intended to inflict harm. They are designed to protect themselves from a perceived threat that originates solely within their own system. The distance functions as their primary shield, and the entire structure of their life is dedicated to preserving its integrity. The essential strategy for navigating this dynamic involves abandoning the effort to disprove their theories and instead concentrating entirely on your own psychological stability. It is impossible to intellectually convince an avoidant that they are safe. This is a discovery they must make internally. Your function is not to pursue them into vulnerability, but to demonstrate, through the consistency of your own behavior, that interdependence represents a strength, not a weakness, and that genuine self-worth is cultivated through connection, not isolation. This approach is the sole viable path to shifting the established dynamic and cultivating an environment where authentic intimacy might eventually flourish. Let me break down how these proofs actually work in practice and what you can do about them. The proof of emotional immunity frequently causes the most confusion for individuals seeking closeness. It establishes a dynamic where any attempt at emotional engagement feels like encountering a solid, impenetrable wall. The avoidant commonly employs a technique we can call conceptual distancing. When a feeling is expressed, they immediately convert it into an abstract concept or a logistical problem requiring a solution, thereby stripping away its emotional content. If the statement is, "I feel lonely when you pull away," the response might be, "Perhaps we should review our communication schedule," or, "That is a fascinating observation regarding the state of modern relationships." They have successfully relocated the conversation from the dangerous, vulnerable realm of feeling to the safe, detached territory of analysis. To effectively challenge this proof, you must resist the reflexive urge to follow them into the analytical space. Your counter-response must gently yet firmly re-anchor the conversation in the feeling, crucially, without demanding a reciprocal feeling in return. The objective is not to compel them to feel what you feel. It is simply to assert your emotional reality. If they attempt to pivot to logistics, you can acknowledge the shift but immediately return to the feeling. You might say, "I agree, logistics are important, but before we discuss the schedule, I need you to fully grasp that the experience I am having is loneliness." This consistent, non-aggressive re-anchoring is the sole method for demonstrating that their perceived emotional immunity is not, in fact, absolute. The reason this works is because you are not attacking their defense system. You are not trying to tear down the wall. You are simply standing in your own truth without requiring them to match it. Over time, this creates a safe environment where they can begin to lower the wall themselves, because your emotional expression is not a demand for them to be vulnerable in return. It is simply a statement of fact. And facts the avoidant can handle. What they cannot handle is the feeling that your emotion is demanding they feel something they are not ready to feel. The proof of unnecessary interdependence reveals itself through subtle, everyday behaviors that are frequently misinterpreted as signs of admirable independence or strength. They will consistently reject minor acts of service, refusing a ride, adamantly insisting on covering their own expenses even when unnecessary, or minimizing any form of assistance they receive. These actions are not driven by politeness. They are deliberate acts of psychological proof. They are actively demonstrating that your contribution to their life is not required. To effectively challenge this proof, the focus must shift from your tendency to give to your willingness to receive. The avoidant is placed in their most vulnerable position when they are required to receive assistance. Instead of proactively offering help, which will almost certainly be rejected, you must begin asking for small, low-stakes forms of assistance from them. Simple requests like, "Would you mind holding this for a moment?" or "Could you quickly look over this email for me?" are not about the task itself. They are about engineering a micro-moment of safe interdependence. This action compels them to momentarily compromise their proof, illustrating that a shared life naturally involves small, safe dependencies that pose no threat of destruction. This is counterintuitive because your instinct is to give to them to show them through your generosity that they can trust you. But giving to an avoidant reinforces their proof. It allows them to remain in the position of not needing. But when you ask them for help, you are creating a situation where they must engage in interdependence from a position of power. They are the helper, not the helped. This feels safe enough for them to participate. And through repeated micro-interactions like this, you are building a foundation of safe interdependence that gradually challenges their belief that all interdependence is dangerous. The proof of self-contained value is the most deeply entrenched theory. It is the core reason for their profound discomfort with praise. Their belief system dictates that accepting your positive valuation inevitably leads to dependency on your continued approval. To challenge this proof, the strategy must shift from praising their achievements to focusing on the impact of their presence on your life. Rather than stating, "You are incredibly successful at your job," which validates their self-contained metric, you can state, "I genuinely enjoyed our conversation last night. You consistently make me consider things from a fresh perspective." This redirects the focus from their internal metric to the relational impact, subtly yet powerfully challenging the notion that their value exists in an emotional vacuum. The difference here is critical. When you praise their achievement, you are commenting on something they already know about themselves. They can dismiss it because it is about them in isolation. But when you comment on the impact they have on you, you are introducing relational value. You are saying, "Your existence in my life creates something that would not exist without you." This is much harder to dismiss because it is about the space between you, not about them alone. It introduces the idea that value can be co-created, that their worth is enhanced, not threatened, by connection. The avoidant pattern is a complex psychological defense mechanism, and the distance is merely the observable consequence of their internal mission to establish these three core proofs. Your objective is not to dismantle this defense through aggressive force, but to cultivate a relational environment that gradually renders the defense mechanism unnecessary. This is accomplished by being consistently non-reactive to their distance, maintaining a robust self-sufficiency in your own life, and being unwaveringly clear about your boundaries. Through your own stable, predictable behavior, you are demonstrating that interdependence is not a trap, and that true self-worth possesses the necessary resilience to withstand both closeness and distance. This fundamental shift in focus, moving away from attempting to change them and toward understanding and managing your own response, is the sole viable path to achieving inner peace. Their distance represents their internal psychological battle. Your peace is your personal decisive victory. The practical application of this profound understanding rests on consistently refusing to participate in the avoidant's elaborate performance. When they are actively engaged in establishing the proof of emotional immunity, your non-reactive presence serves as the most potent counterproof. This requires that when they withdraw, you neither chase, nor panic, nor attempt to alleviate their discomfort. You simply and firmly maintain your own emotional center. A key technique in this regard is what we can call the mirror of calm. When the avoidant is operating in a state of high emotional control, their active attempt to prove immunity, your response must be a calm, factual articulation of your own reality, delivered entirely without emotional charge. If they communicate, "I require space for the next few days to concentrate on my work," rather than reacting with fear or overt anger, you can respond simply with, "Understood. I will be fully engaged with my own projects. We can reconnect when you are ready." This response mirrors their logistical language, yet it is fundamentally rooted in your own self-sufficiency, not a reaction to their withdrawal. In doing so, you effectively prove your own emotional immunity to their distance. What you are doing here is removing yourself as a participant in their proof. They expect you to react, to chase, to protest. That reaction confirms their belief that emotional engagement leads to being controlled or overwhelmed. But when you do not react, when you simply acknowledge and maintain your own center, you are demonstrating that their distance does not destroy you. This is profoundly destabilizing to their system, in a good way. It introduces the possibility that maybe, just maybe, interdependence does not equal annihilation. Maybe they can be close to someone who will not fall apart when they need space. When the avoidant is actively attempting to establish the proof of unnecessary interdependence, they will frequently engage in what we might call pseudo-independence, performing acts of self-sufficiency that are clearly inefficient, even counterproductive. They might insist on driving separately to the same destination or refuse to share. A simple, easily divisible task. Your non-reactive counter-response is to gently and consistently introduce low-stakes shared vulnerability. This involves requesting small, non-threatening moments of need rather than asking for major emotional support. Requests such as, "I cannot quite reach the top shelf, could you grab that for me?" Or, "I am struggling to decide between these two options. What is your opinion?" These minor moments of shared reliance serve as the foundational building blocks of interdependence, and they are sufficiently safe not to trigger the avoidant's core fear. You are teaching them through experience that need does not equal danger. Each small request that they fulfill without catastrophic consequences builds evidence against their proof. They help you reach something, and nothing bad happens. They give you their opinion, and you do not become dependent or controlling. Over time, these micro-experiences accumulate, creating a new body of evidence that challenges the old belief system. Navigating the proof of self-contained value presents the most significant challenge, particularly when they deflect genuine praise or affection. The effective technique here is impact-focused appreciation. Instead of offering praise focused on their inherent quality, like, "You possess such intelligence," you must appreciate the tangible impact of their action on your life, like, "The insight you shared significantly helped me resolve a difficult problem." This strategy redirects the focus from their internal metric to the external relational impact, subtly challenging the deeply held belief that their value exists in an emotional vacuum. You are acknowledging their contribution without demanding they compromise their self-contained value. You are not saying, "You are valuable because I say so." You are saying, "Your actions created a specific positive outcome for me." This is a statement of cause and effect, not a judgment of inherent worth. The avoidant can accept cause and effect. They struggle with judgments of worth because those feel like they could be taken away. But if their action caused your problem to be solved, that is an objective fact. And facts are safe. The ultimate liberating realization is that the avoidance distance constitutes a continuous, demanding psychological effort to manage their internal pervasive fear. Your own peace is secured by recognizing that this intensive effort is fundamentally not your responsibility. You are not the captive audience for their performance of self-sufficiency. You are the steadfast anchor of your own life. By concentrating on your own emotional sovereignty, fostering healthy interdependence with safe individuals, and adhering to your own internal metrics of worth, you construct a dynamic where the avoidance core proofs are rendered irrelevant. The distance they choose to create is no longer an obstacle to your happiness, but merely a defining feature of their own internal landscape. This is the victory that holds true significance. When you stop trying to fix them, when you stop trying to prove to them that they are safe, when you stop participating in their performance, something shifts. You are no longer reinforcing their belief system through your reactions. You are simply being a stable, consistent presence who is neither destroyed by their distance nor demanding of their closeness. You are demonstrating, through your existence, that there is another way to be. And that demonstration, over time, is far more powerful than any argument or plea could ever be. The person who masters this approach does not do so by becoming cold or detached. They do so by becoming deeply rooted in their own worth, their own capacity for connection, their own emotional resilience. They understand that they cannot save the avoidant from their fear, but they can refuse to let that fear dictate the terms of their own life. They can love the avoidant without losing themselves. They can offer connection without demanding it be reciprocated in a specific way. They can maintain their boundaries without punishing the avoidant for having different needs. This is not easy work. It requires tremendous self-awareness, emotional regulation, and the ability to hold space for someone else's process without taking it personally. It requires accepting that you cannot control the outcome, that the avoidant may never become the emotionally available partner you hope for. But it also requires recognizing that your peace, your happiness, your sense of worth does not depend on their transformation. You can be whole whether they change or not, and that wholeness, that self-sufficiency that is rooted in connection rather than isolation, is the most powerful force for change in any relationship dynamic. The avoidant is trying to prove they do not need anyone, but what they actually need is to discover that needing someone does not mean losing themselves. They need to experience, over and over, that interdependence can be safe, that vulnerability does not equal destruction, that their value is not diminished by accepting love. And the only way they can discover this is through the lived experience of being in relationship with someone who embodies these truths without demanding the avoidant adopt them immediately. Your role is not to teach them these lessons through words. Your role is to live them so fully, so consistently, that the avoidant cannot help but notice that your approach to life, your approach to connection, your approach to worth, is fundamentally different from theirs. And in that difference, in that contrast, lies the seed of possibility. The possibility that maybe there is another way. Maybe the fortress is not necessary. Maybe connection is not the threat they always believed it to be. This is the long game. This is the patient work of creating an environment where change becomes possible. Not guaranteed, but possible. And whether the avoidant, ultimately, chooses to step into that possibility or not, you have already won, because you have refused to abandon yourself in the pursuit of someone else. You have maintained your center. You have honored your own worth, and that is the only victory that truly matters. If you recognize these patterns in your relationship, take a moment to reflect before reacting. The distance is not rejection. The distance is their way of proving to themselves that they can survive without needing anyone. Every time they pull away, they're gathering evidence for their belief that emotional immunity, total independence, and self-contained worth are the only paths to safety. Understanding this changes everything about how you respond. Leave a comment sharing your experience with avoidant distancing. Have you seen how the pullback intensifies right when things get close? If this helped you understand what's really happening when someone stays distant to prove their self-sufficiency, hit the like button and subscribe for more content on navigating attachment patterns in relationships. Thanks for watching.